Don't tell me that the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass. Hello and welcome to Shining Moon, a speculative fiction podcast, episode 39. I'm your host, Deborah L. Davitt. Today we'll continue our series by asking questions about writing games, particularly role-playing games. This is a subject dear to my heart because I've spent 20 years of my life playing RPGs, mostly in written form, in play-by-post games. But I have also branched out into live games where I actually have to talk to people. I'm a big proponent of how they help develop writers' skills at world building, characterization, and plot, and for the social bonds they build between people at the table and beyond. My guests today are Zach Welhouse and Amelia Gorman of the game Cerebos. I said it right this time, Cerebos, the Crystal City. Zach Welhouse is a librarian and game designer who lives in the Pacific Northwest. He enjoys hot drinks and meeting dogs who look like goblins. There's a story behind that one, I'm sure. His work has appeared in the Costume Fairy Adventures and Deadlands RPGs and Strange Beasts, a Tarot Zine. Cerebos, the Crystal City, a game about crossing a surreal desert by train, is available through Penguin King Games on itch.io and Drivethru RPG. Welcome to the podcast, Zach.
Hey, Deborah. I'm happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you and meet you in person at long last because I have played Cerebos and I loved it, so I want to introduce it to more people. Amelia Gorman lives in Eureka, where she spends her free time exploring tidepools and redwoods with her dogs and foster dogs. Her fiction has appeared in Nightscript 6 and Cellar Door from Dark Peninsula Press. You can read some of her poetry in Vastarien, Utopia Science Fiction, and Strange Horizons. Her first chapbook, The Elgin-winning Field Guide to Invasive Species of Minnesota, is available from Interstellar Flight Press. Her microchapbook, The Worm Sonnets, is available from the Quarter Press. And I look forward to being able to say that one has also won the Elgin in this year. So we'll see how that goes.
Crossing fingers, but yeah, it's always
crossing fingers. Yeah,
there's always a lot of good chapbooks. Anyway, it's fun to talk to you.
It's nice to see you. Nice to see you on the podcast again. Yeah, it's always fun to have Amelia on because she always has wonderful things to say. And in this particular case, she is. Pressure.
I don't know what I'm gonna say.
It'll all fall out of your mouth at the appropriate times. Don't trust me on this. This is how it works. Cerebos is a fascinating game. The premise is simple. The execution is complex. The premise? That you've boarded a train for the Crystal City of Cerebos. But you can choose your journey's tone right from the start. It might be a full core setting. It might be a fairy tale. It might be science fiction. It might require you to respond in song. And then you're rolling on tables for cards that detail the complications that ensue on the train and the strangeness of the stops along the route, and so on. Halfway through your journey, the game changes. One of the characters becomes the protagonist, drumroll please, and the other characters become advisors who encourage them to either put aside the past and embrace the future, or embrace the past more fully. There's a huge psychological element to play, if you want there to be anyways. Some people might decide to play it solely as an adventure, and that's another entirely correct way to play. So I loved playing this, and as I said, I wanted to go ahead and introduce this to more people. So I'm going to start with Zach, since you're obviously the wellhead from which this game sprang. What was your inspiration for this game? What other games, comics, books, and movies influenced you as you created this strange and liminal world?
I've always liked reading the suggested reading or inspiration sections in other RPGs. So in responding to this, I feel like I'm drawing on my librarian training now, and not just providing the list, but the annotated bibliography.
Yes.
Cerebos comes with about 4 or 5 different annotated bibliographies divided into sections, like on books and movies about trains and travel and cities,
Mm-hmm.
and each one has about 4 to 12 different items on them. The big ones, though, when I'm trying to give the quick pitch or tell people this is my weird game about deserts and cities and trains, uh, go right away to Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities, because it's about a traveler visiting a bunch of cities, but the focus is not on the infrastructure or the tax rates or anything
Mm-hmm.
that you'd expect from a more realistic travelogue about the cities. It's more the feel or the atmosphere or the psychological problem or concept that the city typifies.
Mm-hmm.
And the anime and manga Kino's Journey does something very similar about a traveler who moves between these big picture cities on her talking motorcycle and can only stay there for 3 days before moving on to the next one.
Also, quick
Okay.
interruption. I'm going to interrupt quick. Is that even though Kino travels on a motorcycle, there's that amazing train vignette where there's like one man like clearing the road for train tracks, one man laying down train tracks, and then one man like taking away the train tracks. Like Kino's Journey has one of my favorite little train stories built into it.
Oh, that's so surreal.
It's like that classic cartoon animated gif of the character sitting on top of the tiny train and laying down tracks as the train is going, only it turns it into a big touching story. First is comedy, then is tragedy, or something like that.
Interesting.
In all of those stories, though, the idea is making pit stops along a set route, so it's almost almost like the metaphor of the dungeon, where it's a bunch of squares connected by doors, and each door is a different direction you can go, and then each room is its self-contained little world. Maybe it's a puzzle, maybe it's a monster, maybe it's a moral dilemma, maybe it's even all three. But instead, I'm reclaiming the term railroading and turning it into a positive experience.
Yeah, I liked the fact that even though the journey is kind of sort of set and that you know what your destination is, it's the Crystal City. The city, what the city means to you changes over the course of the journey, and the journey itself changes as you pull items from the deck. So I really enjoyed that. You didn't mention Fallen London as one of your sources of interest, but I will mention that I asked the gentleman who did the RPG Teeth last week, and they said, "Oh yes, it was an influence on us, and we played it heavily back when it was the Echo Bazaar." And oh, by the way, one of the writers for the game is currently one of their GMs. So I'm like, oh, I'm so jealous. So I got a thumbs up. So want to talk to me a little bit about Fallen London and how that influenced you, or at least even subtly?
Oh, definitely, and it is an overt reference. I think Fallen London and Sunless Seas get shout outs
Yeah.
in the annotated bib. So you can see these aspects everywhere, from the overt, like the naming styles of many of the sample characters, which
Mm-hmm.
offer a role or an attitude rather than a name.
Mm-hmm.
It's used slightly differently here because the characters are. It's more a name of convenience due to the literary amnesia that's happening in the story, rather
Mm-hmm.
than some of the more gothic commentary that Fallen London does with it.
Yeah.
To the ways that the islands in Sunless Sea and the different stops in the space train game in the same setting pull up very similar. The beads along a chain, stops along a chain, each one is a contained narrative unit.
Mm-hmm.
And then even in the way that the various stops are there along the line, but in between they're big question marks.
Yes.
In one of the Fallen London design blogs, the concept of campfires in the desert as a narrative technique was mentioned.
Interesting.
That's where, even though it's a very browser-based experience where you aren't explicitly told, here's role play, create your character in your head and hold little conversations in your head. People do. They get very invested in this world because the game provides these guide points, these campfires, and then everyone wends their way between these common experiences, but their own groups and their own personalities and their own conversations make the story different for everyone.
I like that interpretation. Thank you.
It reminds me a bit of the game Aegon too, which is like you are sort of like, you are not Odysseus himself, but you are an Odysseus type ship, and you are these sort of Greek heroes finding your way home through a chain of strange islands, and it's like each one sort of you solve the problem of the island.
Ooh. Yeah, I only have a very brief knowledge of Aegon. That was one that was recommended to me, and I decided that I was not going to wind up leveraging it, but I was really intrigued by it when it was mentioned to me. So when you were writing the system, it's very akin in some ways to the current trend of solo journaling games. Get to a certain point, draw a card from a deck, and respond to it. Why did you decide to develop the game in this method as opposed to any other, like roll from tables that take you all the way through the book, roll so many dice, and if it's positive you go ahead, if it's negative you go back a certain number of entries? Why the cards? Why was that a design choice?
The cards were actually a cross promotion, or how can I break out of the perceived indie niche side of things, because one of the initial inspirations was random tables in RPG books.
Okay.
I love. I guess the most mainstream example is the trinkets table in the Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook.
Oh yes,
5th edition. Each one of those little objects that could tell us a complete story all on its own is just presented as a throwaway table. It was one of my early freelance assignments. I was writing lists that could be system agnostic lists for games, and then between the idea, hey, what if I made a list of 101 strange cities, and an art folder that I had been keeping for years and years, just showing all the weird, wonderful cabinet of curiosity devices that I could find on Twitter and Tumblr, architecture blogs, oddities blogs, like skulls in places you shouldn't see a skull, or a combination
like
of
anywhere in the body except the head, right?
That's right, yeah. Or those beautifully mummified golden corpses, a gun that looks like a clarinet, a pyramid made out of anything except for stone.
Skulls.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you did mention heads in places that they shouldn't be, and that's a top one for where they shouldn't be. You worked with a number of other writers, including Amelia here, to write those decks, which incorporated new ideas, perspectives, and more fantastical elements than you could probably have achieved just on your own. Could the two of you talk to me about the process of co-writing for this particular part of the game, particularly Amelia? What was it like writing in someone else's world? What were some of the constraints that you were given, if any?
Yeah, so I thinking about this, it's like I can come up with kind of two major ones. Is first that it's really socially like interesting. Zach and I have been friends for over half our lives at this point. We've been, bouncing ideas off each other since we were 15 years old.
Oh.
Like 2 nights ago, I was asking him for advice on a Hodag poem. But then it becomes more serious, like when you're doing something more professionally with friends, I think, which is interesting. And like, I'd love to say that like there was like a big drama, and like we almost stopped being friends and it almost didn't work out, and there was huge problem, like friction. No, it went really smoothly, but there was always this kind of like nervousness in the back of my mind of like, if I don't do good enough, I mean, first of all, I have to meet the deadlines. If I don't do good enough, is it gonna be like awkward?
Yeah.
And yet, in fact, in spite of all of that, like it did work out professionally, to work with one of my longtime great friends on this.
Hey, thanks. I'm glad that it felt so good, because I have some good things to say too, but like you were saying, it definitely does. There's a power dynamic that even if it's not something that we see between each other as individuals, it's there in the back of the mind, or not just implied, but stated on the NDA form.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about next. Was at least a couple of my author friends who've been on recently were talking about co-writing a novel together, and they actually put together a contract. And they signed the contract, and the contract was, we have so and so much amount of time to get this done, and each of us is responsible for X amount of words. And they really, 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 really endorsed the idea of having that sort of constraint in place up front so that nobody's feelings get hurt at the back end. And so apparently you were wise enough to do something like that with that NDA.
Yeah, and we didn't have to ourselves. It's like Penguin King Games and the editor-in-chief at Penguin King Games did an excellent job just task mastering the whole thing. So it was like we could bounce ideas off each other, but like things like deadlines and and formats and all the like boring bureaucracy of it all, it was very nice to have a like. I mean, I love self-published stuff, but this like definitely illustrated the advantage of a more traditional publishing model, that we didn't have to do that with each other.
Yeah,
definitely.
Exactly.
I didn't get involved in writing, and I'm sure that very few people do, to focus on the contracts and the bureaucracy and the back end, but it definitely is a valuable skill to have. I've already dropped one anime reference in this show, so I'll go ahead and add another. The show Keep Your Hands Off Aizoken is about a anime production club in a high school, and the hero of the show is essentially the show's production manager, who wrangles the creatives and gets them to acknowledges, yes, you have your passions, this is about making your vision sparkle, but you need to remember to eat, you need to remember that you can't spend 5 days animating someone's hand when it's just going to be a half second of screen time, and that's some of the style of stuff that my editor Dave Prokopets at Penguin Games was huge on. I've worked for him as a freelancer on Costume Fairy Adventures, and being familiar with his workflow, which is very Trello focused, very contract focused, it helps. It gives the structure then that everyone else can bounce around in and have their fun.
Yeah, which does segue into kind of the more like artistic constraint I struggled with, which was the length of what I was writing, because it had to be tiny. It had to fit on this tiny little thing that was barely bigger than a playing card. And I know, like, originally I think Dave sent me like a sort of like 150 words, like not even 100, that's way too many, like 30, 50, 100 words, I don't know. But then I would write it, and he'd be like,
"This is not an ideal project for me." No.
And then I'd send him what I had, and he'd be like, "No, this still won't fit on the card." So I'm like, I'm using too long of words. I have to either use shorter words, or I have to
or fewer of them,
or fewer of them.
And
haiku.
Like,
it's like
haiku.
Every single time, I think like Dave would be like, "Amelia, this doesn't fit on the card. You have to make it shorter."
Oh God.
And I like never in my life have I honestly been like gladder to be a poet, I think, because at least I was like, okay, I should be able to do this. Like, I want to write a page on every single Cerebos event I'm writing, or every single Cerebos stop I'm writing. But okay, I should be able to make it punchy and fit it in a small space.
One of the things that writing it small like that, though, does allow for is for the imagination of the players to basically expand out around it. So when you've got it down to that little kernel of meaning, it's like seeing just a glimpse of the monster in a horror movie. The imagination fleshes out the rest for it. So there's something to be said for the minimalistic approach that Cerberos took on the cards.
Yeah,
That
I
was
think.
definitely. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I guess I had two things. First of all, I think it was Zach who told me actually like some of my early ideas for cards. He's like, there should be at least two ways for people to interact with a stop. It's like some of my stops were too, again, like obviously I'm sure the word railroady is going to come up a lot, but some of my stops were too railroady. And Zach was like, there should be at least two suggestions of how players can like dive into this. And then also, I was gonna say, a like kind of point of inspiration was the board game Tales of the Arabian Nights, which has these cards that are these sort of bare bones thing, and you can play it as more a board game where you just read the cards, but the game rules themselves encourage you to like read the card, but then like expand on it and like really tell a deeper story beyond the sort of four sentences that are on the card.
And Zach,
I've
you were
played
about to
that
say?
game both ways now, and
I've played it with you. We've played it together, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fun game. One of the times that I played it, though, we eventually became time crunched in the end, and so the expounding and adding flourishes was, if not expressly, then subtly frowned upon. And I think that also speaks to what Deborah was saying about providing the negative spaces on the cards and why you may want to keep them punchy. Because while it was initially a aspect that actually I can't remember the order of events right now. There was some copywriting that needs to fit on the card, but that happened to dovetail perfectly with the artistic idea that we just want to tell part of the story, reach out the hand halfway so that the players can reach out their hand halfway, or prevent the real common RPG world building bugbear of sitting down to create a world, and then at the end you're 500 pages in, you have a dictionary, you have this big tome, but then all the questions are already answered. So what's the point of playing it as a game? This really came out in playtesting, where one of the things I noticed from a lot of players was I'd read them the description, which was on a table and not a card in those days, and they kept on as getting the sense, when do we get to the fireworks factory? When do I get to jump in and say something as the player? And so cutting that back and providing a standardized form hopefully provided the more haiku-like experience where the artistic value and the spark comes from how you as the writer or how the guest writers work within the set of artificial constraints.
Oh, actually, I had one more thing to say about that, I guess, on top of that is, and I think this might happen a lot when you get a lot of, like, people who are enthusiastic about even the same types of things, is there was some enthusiasm about, like, too overlapping of guest writer content in the beginning, because I sent in, I mean, the sort of plan was, like, send in, 3 or 4 ideas or something, and maybe get 1 or 2 approved. And I, one of my top ideas was like, I really want to write a horror conductor, which is sort of a optional GM role someone can take in Cerebos. And someone else had beat me to saying they wanted to write the horror conductor. and I believe that was Madeline Ember, and she did an amazing job with Grimlight, the folk horror conductor, and is very like interesting of like, you know, jumping on these things and then realizing how much we all had in common, and and like
that is beautiful.
finding different ways. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna write like an Edgar Allan Poe event deck, and and I loved
Interesting.
Madeline's conductor. So yeah, it like totally worked out for the best. But it was very interesting in the beginning where everyone was spitballing these ideas, and there were a lot of overlapping ideas.
Interesting is a good word for it. So many people wanted to write about scary trains, and we had such a stacked deck of people who love and are good at horror. Will Mendoza, that's his central area. Kevin Snow, who wrote for Fall in London. Amelia, of course, Madeline, and so. Well, this could have just been Midnight Meat Train, the RPG. I really wanted to explore many genres and present lots of examples of what the setting can be.
And then here's all your guest writers like, okay, we're gonna write Midnight Meat Train. We're gonna write That Damn Train by, I believe, Zelazny. We're gonna write that haunted train from Final Fantasy VI. Like, we're gonna write all the horror trains.
Oh
There are
God.
a lot of them, and you have to acknowledge that when you're creating a game in a specific genre, you do need to nod to the inspirations.
Good job to you and Dave for reining us in and making us write at least a little bit that wasn't just haunted trains.
Well, thank
Zach,
you. You mentioned the pitching process, so I can say a little bit more about what it was like
Sure.
to talk about the co-writing process.
Yeah.
Because in shared projects, it's very easy to say, oh, you can do anything. The only limit is your imagination. It's surreal. It's unmapped. It's dreamlike. But if you do too much of that, then you don't have a sense of what its strengths are or where the central ideas can really shine. And you're stuck listening to someone's dream from the night before, which has symbolism you don't understand and references and jokes that only make sense if you were there.
This is also Zach criticizing my Hodag poem 2 days ago, by the way.
Wait, what?
That it was full of like references only that's like the actual writing advice you gave me 2 days ago. So good to know I haven't changed.
It's not just criticism aimed at you. If that softens, I hope that softens the blow a little. It's the whole world that's wrong.
It's all good. It's a good like, it's good to know that people sort of write from the heart, and then you have to advise them, how do you take your writing from the heart and make it more accessible to everyone?
Yeah, I just wound up giving very similar advice to a young poet who had just joined a forum that I'm on, and her poetry was very beautiful. It's just that I bounced hard off of it because I didn't understand a word of what was going on. I didn't know who she was talking to in terms of the references. If there's a you and there's a he, and which one of them is it that we are actually using as the central reference? You got to be clear. And why are certain words off to the side? And well, you wanted to call attention to them, but they're just random words. They're not like the central images of the poem or anything like that. You've got some really good stuff here that's buried in the text. Take those and put those as the ones that are shuttled to the outside and emphasized with the position and that sort of thing. So everyone needs a critic every now and again.
Definitely. To continue the cartography metaphors, the train metaphors, where we were going, we didn't have maps, but we had a compass. We had some...
That's a good thing.
Yeah, some guidelines, some examples. Most of my RPG writing has been freelance for other people's passion projects or other people's big properties. So in a more organizational role, I was really trying to focus on taking the good examples from my own experience, working on teams where I felt supported and valued and was actually contributing to a narrative rather than just providing 500 words about bugs. And I hope that the critique, the commentary, the back and forth conversation with Amelia and the other writers was much more of that.
Is this a true story? Did you ever just get to write 500 words about bugs for a game?
I did not.
Okay.
If anyone wants to hire me to write 500 words about bugs, I would be available and germane to that.
Gets my endorsement as bug lover and poet. He's good at it.
When you were playtesting the game, what were some problems that your beta testers alerted you to, and how did you address those issues? Besides the one of where do we jump in? Because that lasted, I think, when in our game of Cerberos, Cerebos, that lasted like the first 15 minutes, and then we all got into it. But that first 15 minutes, it was a little bit like learning how to jump rope all over again, because you're waiting for your turn to get in, and how do I move into this space? So talk to me a little bit about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, perfect. 2 additional notes on the interaction. First, before getting into some of the other stuff under the hood, but just following up on the advice to the different co-writers, the guest writers, I felt myself suggesting a lot, in addition to different ways you can interact with the stop or the event. Invitations or hooks within the event, so not just here's a haunted house, but here's a haunted. I'd ask, why would you go into the haunted house?
Why would anybody go into the haunted house? You know it's haunted. It's like every horror movie ever. No, I'm not going in there. And then we end the story 5 minutes after we began.
I almost had a Cthulhu game end like that once, and it only took appeals to genre to get the players to go in.
My Cthulhu group always was like, not that we won't go in, it's just like, we'll just light it on fire from the very beginning, because we know it's how it's going to end. We may as well just light it on fire to start with our sanity intact.
Unlike other games, there's not even the promise of treasure that you can keep and live a stable life afterwards. And any treasure is going to be a double-edged sword at best. But adding interaction points to, like, maybe you hear a voice you recognize from the haunted house, or there's a delicious aroma of pie coming from within, and you're out of supplies.
Oh dear, it's Soylent Green. No.
Delicious. And in encouraging those different aspects of engaging with the stops and events, that's where the share a meal move came from. Because one of the other problems with interaction is you want the players not just interacting with the world, but with one another. And literary amnesiacs on a train with a very strong sense of purpose doesn't always... It can get very insular very fast. So
yeah.
Trying to provide areas where the characters want to engage with each other.
But did the shared, so I mean, in Cerebos, as you sort of through flashbacks discover your amnesiac's history, did the concept of 2 characters sharing one flashback where they were in the same scene predate that realization, or postdate it?
It predated it. However, many conductor abilities which engage with and encourage the shared flashbacks came afterward. So I saw the shared flashbacks as a locus of future growth. Hey, let's do more with this concept and engage with it in ways that I'm still building, I'm still adding on. I'm working with guest writers who are creating their own conductors, encourage them to engage with that aspect of the game rather than aspects that people already felt pretty comfortable with, like keepsakes and mementos.
Yeah, the keepsakes are actually very cool. I liked the fact that you could release the keepsake. I thought that was a very cool move. You got to still retain the ability associated with it, but the charges associated with it are gone effectively, if I'm remembering the rules correctly. It's been a little while since I played, and I've slept since then. So
Definitely. That came from probably the seed of that was a academic article I read a while back about is nostalgia good or bad? Yeah,
Mm,
and it can be both. It just depends on how it's employed. One of the central metaphors of the game is how do you cope with your past? How do you deal with it? And
mhm.
sometimes it can be a ankle weight that's weighing you down, and sometimes it can be an engine that's driving you forward and to good places.
Zach, that's not fair. I want an answer. Is nostalgia good or bad? Like, simplify it for me,
Indeed.
so I can adjust my own life as is helpful.
Oh, but that's why we tell stories. Maybe in your story it can be a good thing. Uh, in addition to that, though, math is not my strong point. There's in the game design community, it seems like there's a very strong split between the people who come from the wargaming math side of things and
Mhm.
the drama, theater, storytelling side of things, the creative writing side of things, and
Yes.
those are big stereotypes. But at least in my case, it's definitely true. Some designers can look at the probabilities of dice and internalize how those different mechanical portions of the game will play out, kind of do simulations of them. I
Mhm.
can't do that, so I need lived examples of players making their own choices and saying, do I want to roll these dice now? Or, oh, the story really suggests that I should make this roll, or the genre that I'm in suggests I should succeed here. So how do we tweak the math behind the scenes to make those outcomes more likely?
We had a very hard time being able to release some of them because they were the cursed ones. We had twisted talismans basically because we were doing the folk horror train. And so we some of us simply could not get rid of our monkey's paws no matter how hard we tried, and that's why my character ended up as badly off as she did.
It was a good story, though. I mean, it was
It
a
was a great story.
absolutely like my heart was breaking at the end of that for your character. It was
You are
a,
both smiling, so I'm going to take that as a success and the rules working as intended.
Absolutely, yes. It's just that I was very sad when that character decided to die on me. I'm like, oh, it's been 20 years and I finally had a character die on me. Ah. What did you enjoy most about writing and designing this game?
Ooh. Two answers. One
Mm-hmm.
a little flippant and light, a little more nuanced. A shorter one, just going back to, for example, in preparing to talk to you today, reading a bit from a book and thinking, "Hey, that's a really funny line. Did I write that? Did Amelia?"
Mm-hmm.
And either way, it's a nice feeling. Oh, I have real smart, creative, funny friends. Or hey,
Mm-hmm.
in spite of my writerly doubts that I have sometimes, I can still surprise myself and make myself laugh.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the quick one. The more nuanced one is harkening back really to the co-writing experience, experiencing new life outside of my own skills, outside of my own perceptions that grow from the seeds that I wrote. So sometimes that's watching comments from an editor turn a wild, many-limbed dream into a focused experience.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and specifically for this project, turning art briefs and comic scripts into full works of visual art. That is an
Ooh.
amazing experience.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Cynthia Cheng on the comics in the front and back of the book, and many artists throughout, just
Mm-hmm.
taking ideas for the different moods and turning them into something that I could see. And the wonderful rabbit, the wonderful crab.
Yes, the artist absolutely brought this book to life. It's just all incredible. There's like a full page spread that has every kind of conductor character the GM can play all sitting together in a train car, and it's somehow like they work, but they're so like disparate. It was a really amazing piece of art.
I mentioned Cynthia's name, so I'll also give shout outs to Shell Khan, Madeline Ember, and Canon Bao, who provided the art throughout.
Very nice. Thank you for that. It's important to give credit where it's due, and artists don't get nearly the credit that they are deserving of in the industry. I really feel, particularly in the era of AI.
Ooh, yeah.
Who did the layout? Can we also shout out the layout person who might have been also one of the artists? I'm not sure.
That's an unsung hero right there, is the layout person.
Francita Soto, amazing on layout.
Yes.
Francita works for so many small press and indie RPGs and gives each one a very unique sense of design purpose, between the font choice or the designs in the margins, different call out boxes. As one of the Kickstarter stretch goals, we got to work with Francita and create almost a character passport or a little booklet.
I sent that when we played together, Deborah and I, in our Wednesday night gaming group. I did send them that. And I'm like, well, probably with an online group, you can't print it, or I mean, you could print it and assemble it, but we can't all like sit around the table together.
So
with
we were basically turning our heads upside down to look at the.
But it's like I can definitely send it to you guys as
it was great.
This option that people could do as a in-person way to play this game.
Yeah, dye it with tea bags and add some stamps, different colored ink.
Oh, that would have been fun. Yeah. Since you mentioned the Kickstarter, let's talk about kickstarting the game, because it is a whole process and one that I am eyeballing for a game of my own that I designed with my husband. But it is currently in an NDA status with a publisher, and I haven't heard back from the publisher in forever. So I am at this point. It's just like, are you guys still there? Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. So what was the hardest part of the Kickstarter process for you, and what was the most rewarding?
Thankfully, the most difficult parts of the Kickstarter were ones that my editor took care of. The design of the Kickstarter, the budget, and the death of so many good Kickstarters, which he handled with so much aplomb and grace, the fulfillment. Because the more physical objects you add to a Kickstarter, the more things will go wrong. And he both talked me out of adding more physical things to the game, and then handled the shipment of the limited edition hardcover books and all of the other paper feelies. So
I really enjoyed you guys kept it simple, and it's like you get the game. Like you don't get, weird like things by other people that isn't the game, and like stretch goals will be added to the game, and it's like you either get like the digital book or you get the fancy book.
That part was certainly intentional, especially as a creator who doesn't have name recognition. I feel like people are more willing to just dip a toe into the water if they can get the full experience digitally as a game. And then once you become someone with a following or someone who wants the whole lifestyle, that's where you can start throwing in the major upgrades.
They did do one cute thing though that wasn't so much like Kickstarter based, but you had the like, if you get enough shares online, we will add content for everyone who bought the game. So you had the like little crab, right?
Silver, the city of discovery.
Yes.
That was so fun. We asked Shell, the artist of the crab art in the book, to expand upon it and give the full image of the crab. And then I wrote up a bit about how Silver, the city of discovery, is a crabitation that travels across the desert. And
gravitation.
Yes. It wasn't intentionally... It came from a place of love that I was going in with the internet's love of crabs. It was not a calculated move, but the love definitely helped. And then we encouraged people to share it or draw their own crabs, because the traveling crab city needs to travel across the internet. and I'm not sure how well this would work for every campaign, but because Twitter was still around and healthy, that helped.
Yeah.
And Dave is in a very unique position as a popular Tumblr author.
Like
Very often,
every other day I see something on Facebook, like someone like a totally new person sharing something from his Tumblr.
he is one of the ones who is constantly screen capped and reshared,
Mm-hmm.
and he's cropped from it, so that definitely helped. But even without, I don't know about the right transitional preposition here, but PR is not in my nature. It always feels like shilling. So when people say good things and experience that joy organically, that's the stuff that makes me feel good about the campaign. It shows that people are willing to devote their time, their money, their focus, their clicks to an idea, and that's very self-affirming. I'm very thankful to the actual players, the journalists, the Kickstarter watchers, who all raised awareness and offered commentary, because it was a lot of sending out cold calls and not getting responses, or
Yeah.
But when
So
it worked.
Yeah, apparently it did. Apparently you did very well.
I did not expect that.
You hit every single stretch goal you made up. It was so cool.
Yeah, in the beginning we were scrambling. We were prepared for failure. We were not prepared for success. But and Dave talked me out of the snow globe. So
would it have had a little train inside of it?
It would have had a...
Was it like a Snowpiercer-esque train and it was just terrible?
It would have been Silvera, the city of discovery, our most iconic character, in the middle of the snow globe, and then the snow would be sparkly sand, and then there would be a little train and little articles of travel around a resin sculpted base. So it'd be like an artifact, your very own memento or keepsake of the game that you could engage with the game with. But production and shipping of snow globes is not something you should get. You even getting into t-shirts is risky, and those have been around forever. So
Are you sure your most memorable character is not the little dog with a string of sausages in its mouth in the comic that also looks suspiciously like your dog?
That is a very memorable, very good character. A very good boy.
Aww. I just wanted to point out that I'm going to point out something from our game, and you have to have multiple ways of engaging with any given location, as you said. Would you ever have imagined that somebody would have shown up with a ghost dog attached to a little, basically an invisible dog attached to a leash, and show up at the Library of Bones, and have the dog suddenly go crazy and escape with one of the bones?
Beautiful turn of events, yes. Random draw of the 36 cards or whatever that's in the decks.
I would not have expected that. It's that kind of emergent play story that I love, though. Creating a narrative out of these random elements.
Yeah, exactly. So what's coming up next for each of you? Zach, you mentioned by email that your next game would be, and I quote, about sharing meals, weird ingredients, and adventure chef culture, which are three things that I'm sitting here going, and Iron Chef? Does that mean adventure chef culture? What is this?
It does. Iron Chef is a very interesting point of comparison, though, because it was 100% the inspiration behind my first indie project, Intergalactic Cooking Challenge, which is Iron Chef in space with cooking anime vibes. But as I've gamed, as I've played, as I've explored, and doing research on more cooking stories, the thing that always comes out of cooking stories is that it's about community, it's about sharing the sensual delights of food, and competition is very often seen as a problem, something that encourages macho culture. It doesn't have to, but you can definitely see that in a lot of cooking shows and the rise of the celebrity chef. So, while I love that stuff, it's very near to my creative heart. I'm taking more of a feeding the monsters, helping the monsters, having. Yeah, I'm going to go with cozy vibes.
I was going to say cozy.
There's more to it than that, but you can definitely run it as cozy, and I think that's a important counterpoint to something like my current anime fixation, Delicious in Dungeon, which is all about eating the monsters.
Yeah, I watched the first episode of that, and I want to get back to it, but that requires my husband and I to have time to sit down and actually watch it together. So, yes, I enjoyed the first episode of that very much.
Maybe if you weren't playing in like 8,000 tabletop games, you'd have time.
8,000? Come on, it's like 4. Amelia, what's up?
Games can fill the space that they're given.
Exactly. Yes, they can.
The Amelia, other game I'm working on right now is Bell, Book, and Candle. It's a tarot hack of Beak, Feather, and Bone, which uses a standard 52 card deck of playing cards and a city map to create a city that then you can use in your stories or your role-playing games or just experiencing it as a experience. I just held up a map that came with Beak, Feather, and Bone, but the innovation in Bell, Book, and Candle is that it uses a tarot deck instead, which offers more moving parts, more crunch.
Oh, definitely.
And hopefully more thematic widgets to hold on to, because if there's something that is constant in my game design, it's I don't know when to leave enough alone. I love adding things on, and then it's the work of the playtesters or the editors or my own doubts to say, okay, now pare that away, focus it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be good.
It sounds it. Amelia, what's up next for you, other than your own several games that you're playing in, most of which with me?
Yeah, I mean, socially, I have like a huge amount of my free time goes to playing amazing tabletop games with Deborah. My own creative stuff, I'm working on a lot of poetry about brand new and highly philosophical cryptids. You can read one recent one in Utopia Science Fiction magazine. You can read one in Strange Horizons. And I have one coming out in Tower magazine about imagining if Harry Harlow's cloth and wire monkey mothers were a cryptid.
You just got him.
Sorry to make you joke. Sorry, you were having a sip of tea when I said that. But yes, it is imagining that kind of famous cloth wire mother experiment if those were living cryptids.
Okay, you're going to have to send me links to all of those because I don't think I've read all of them. I know that the wire mother was your Halloween costume this past year.
No, I was the cloth mother. I was the cloth mother this year. I'm going to be the wire mother next year, but I was the cloth mother.
Wire mother bad.
Except the wire mother is the one that like feeds you. So.
Oh my God. All right. Thank you both for so much for having been on. Next week, we're going to shift gears. And although the deadline for the nebulas is April 15th, so by the time this episode goes live, everybody will have finished their tabulations and their voting and everything like that. We're going to be reading the nebulas with Riza Wolf, Sam W. Peixoto, A.T. Sayre, and A.P. Howell. See you all next time, and we are out.
Bye, friends.